So we're ready to continue on with our study of integers. Just a quick review from what I had dubbed integers A, which was basically just our first lesson. We looked at multiplying and dividing integers. Now, as I said, I will probably teach integers in a different order than most math teachers, only because I want to start with the easiest ones, with the easiest steps, and then gradually work to getting harder, which will be the third lesson, C integers, which is subtraction. So our previous lesson, which was lesson A, once again, we did multiplying and dividing integers. And we had the same questions each and every time. Can I multiply? Can I divide integers? Yes. My first step was to do the math. And then once I did the math, I got my answer. I either got my product when I multiplied or I got my quotient when I divided. Then I had to go back and look at the signs. And if they were the same signs, if I had two positives or I had two negatives, then my answer was always going to be a positive. If I had opposite signs, the first one was negative, the second one was positive, or the first one was positive and the second one was negative, then my answer had to be a negative. Now we're ready to shift gears, and we're going to have a couple more steps here that we really have to focus on and pay attention. So this is integers B because we're going to go to the middle one that has a few more steps, a little bit more complicated. But here's the key. If I can learn these steps, then the next lesson's integer C, subtraction of integers, is actually going to be pretty easy because I'll just repeat the steps a couple of times. So let's look at what we're talking about. So when we go through these, we're going to ask once again the same question to begin. Can I add integers? And that answer is yes. When I go through it though, I have to start with looking at the signs this time. So when I look at them, I have to ask, do they have the same signs? And that's either going to be a yes or a no. I'm either going to have two positives or two negatives, or I'm going to have one positive and one negative. If that answer is yes, I'm simply going to keep the sign and add the numbers together. If it's two positives, my answer is going to be positive, and I add them together. If it's two negatives, I'm going to keep the negative for my answer and still add the numbers together. However, if the answer is no, I have one positive and one negative, then I'm going to keep the sign of the largest one after I subtract. So let's look at what this looks like then. So we've got these first four problems, once again, that we're going to start with on your packet. So my first one says negative 7 plus 14. Now, the math, once again, is not difficult math. These are very basic math problems when I get down to the math itself. It's knowing, am I going to add, am I going to subtract, right? And then which sign is going to be kept with my answer. That's the key to being able to be successful on this lesson. So when I look at that, I'm going to go through my steps. Do I have the same sign? No. So that tells me I'm going to have to do some subtraction. So when I look at it, once again, I have that understood positive sign with my 14, and I would strongly suggest that you put that on your paper. That way, when we get into more complicated math, you won't get confused. That way, in junior high and even your freshman year in algebra, you won't get confused because you'll have that practice of adding that understood positive sign. Since it's a no and I'm going to subtract, I'm going to stack them with the largest number on top. Now I'm going to emphasize largest number because a lot of times we get into the idea, well, I know 14 is greater than negative 7, but it doesn't matter because I could end up having like 7, positive 7, plus a negative 14. We're not talking about the largest value. Once again, we're talking about the largest number that's there. So 14 will go on top. I'm going to subtract 7 because they're opposite signs, and that gives me 7. Not difficult math. Once again, though, now I go back and I look at them, and I ask which one is the largest number. Well, in that case, it is 14. Once again, it's not the largest value, it is the largest number. So if it's the largest number is 14 and that's a positive, then my answer has to be in a positive. If you think about it this way, and you think about number lines when we first started looking at integers way back when we started doing coordinate planes, what that is saying is if I went backwards from 0 on my coordinate plane to negative 7, and then it says I need to move forward from there 14 steps. Well, from negative 7 to 0 is 7 steps, but I have to go another 7 steps, and that would take me to positive 7. So that's what we're doing with the math, other than having to put it on a number line and plot it out, because some of these numbers are going to be kind of tricky if we had to do it on a number line. Well, let's go straight across where we have positive 33 plus a negative 38. Same type of math problem, but my signs are in a different order. We're still going to go through the same steps. As I look at it, I ask, do I have the same sign? No. So I know my math is going to be subtraction. I'm always going to put my largest number on top. 38 is going to go on top. I'm going to subtract 33. Now when I subtract those, once again, that's pretty basic math. 38 minus 33 is 5. If you don't know that off the top of your head, get your handy dandy calculator and do your subtraction. You're going to get 5. But here's where I have to look at my signs. So when I look at my signs and I notice I've got a positive and a negative, I have to look at the numbers themselves, not the values, and ask which one's bigger. Well, 38 is bigger than 33. Since 38 is bigger, then I know my answer has to be in the form of negative 5. So I keep the sign of the largest number. Not the greatest value, but the largest number. All right, so negative 8 plus negative 39 in the bottom left there. When I look at them, I know I can add integers. I'm good there. Do I have the same sign? Yes, I do. So I'm just going to simply keep the sign when I get my answer, and I'm going to add this time. So this is my first time I'm actually adding to find the answer. And I do that because they have the same sign. 39 plus 8, pretty basic math, 47. What kind of 47? Well, I go back to my signs. They're both negative, so my answer has to be negative. Bottom right, I've got 43 plus negative 20. Do I have the same signs? Once again, I had that understood positive. I would put that on your paper. It's going to make your life a lot easier as we do these and we continue to move forward throughout the year. So when I have them and I notice that they are opposite signs, then my math has to be, since it's a no, subtraction. Once again, when I subtract, I always put the largest number on top. We're not looking at values, we're just looking at numbers. So then I subtract, then I have 43 minus 20. 3 minus 0 is 3, 4 minus 2 is 2, so I know I have a 23. What's the sign? Well, it says that I'm going to keep the sign of the largest number. My largest number, once again, not value, is 43, so I know my answer has to be in the form of positive. All right, so let's look at these bottom left 3. So just like on our previous lesson, we're going to do the bottom left 3, and I'm going to leave the bottom right 3 in case you have some questions and I can review them with you. So these are all different ways that I can see these type of math problems. Once again, I can do integers of whole numbers. I can do them with decimals. I can do them with fractions. It doesn't matter as long as I do all the correct math that I know to do up to this point. It's the sign part and if I'm going to add or subtract that's new to this lesson. The math itself is not. So when I start looking at these, I see there's a parentheses around that first one there, negative 8 8/10 plus a negative 3. Once again, those parentheses are not doing any math for me. Those parentheses are just simply separating the function of addition from the negative sign. So when I start doing that math, then I know I have to look at it and ask, do they have the same sign? They do. So I know I'm going to end up adding. So when I add them then, we have to be cautious here since one is a decimal and one is not. Because when we get in a hurry, what we end up doing is this problem. 3.8 plus 3, then I end up with 4.1. That's not going to be the right answer. And the reason it's not the right answer is because I have to remember my proper steps of decimals. I have to start with lining up my decimals, filling in with zeros where they need to be, and then bringing my decimal down. So when I look at negative 3, when I look at 3, I have to remember that that's actually the same as 3.0. Why do I have to have 3.0? Because I have a decimal point in my 8.8. When I have one decimal point, then I have to have another decimal point in the other one. When I line up my decimal points, then I'm good to go. So if you should happen to have some that have 2, 3, 4 decimal points, which you might later on this year, then you have to make sure that your decimal points line up and that all of those decimal positions is the same number. If one of them had 2 decimal positions and the other one had 5 decimal positions, I have to fill in with zeros to make sure they all have 5. So I've lined up my decimals, I filled in with my zeros, now I'm going to bring my decimals straight down. So we looked at multiplying with decimals and dividing with decimals yesterday, and all those are different. So a reminder, the steps of all decimal work are in your math packets that I've given you, and we highlighted them before Christmas break to review them and remember where they were. So if you struggle with those, look in your packet or go back in your book because we did do them earlier this semester. Once I bring my decimal down, then I just have to add. 8 plus 0 is 8, and 3 plus 3 is 6, so my answer is 6.8 or 6 8/10. But what type of 6 8/10? Well, once again, when I look at it, I have the same sign, so I'm going to keep the sign. Right? Don't get confused with yesterday. Same signs means I keep the signs in addition. So I'm going to have a negative 6 8/10 as my answer. Now I stacked them in this next one only to show you that they can be stacked. The addition is separated from the subtractions. Maybe you would see parentheses around both of those numbers just so that the negatives could be separated from the addition, but it doesn't matter how it's set up because we know how to do this math. Once again, it's knowing am I going to add them and what I'm going to do with my sign, either positive or negative, with my answer. So I look at it, I know I can add them. Do I have the same sign? Yes, indeed I do. So I'm simply going to do the addition. When I add them, 8 and 4 is 12. I carry my 1. 6 plus 6 is 12 plus 1 is 13. My answer is 132, but then I look and I remember they're both negative, so I have to have a negative 132. Now this last one's going to have a lot more work, so if you don't feel like you have enough room and space to write on them, you might get a scratch piece of paper to work them because there are several steps to this one that we're going to have to do in order to do it correctly. And it's not because it is integer work, it's because it's all the steps we have to do when it comes to fractions with non-common denominators. So if we have extra paper, it might be helpful. And then you can attach it to your notes and you'll be good to go. All right, I'm hoping you grab some extra paper because as I said, there's going to be a lot of steps here and there's some of you that you struggle to remember these steps, so writing them down would be a really good idea because I'm going to put them on here. Remember, this is just a recorded PowerPoint video, so all you have to do is hit pause and you can pause it, rewind it, rewatch it as many times as you need. So once again, we're doing integer work, so that's what we have to start with. We have to figure out, are we going to be adding or subtracting our numbers? So when I look at my signs, well, 3/8 doesn't have one, so that's the understood positive, and I would go ahead and add it. And then 1/6 is negative, so that tells me I don't have the same sign, so I'm going to end up subtracting my fractions. So when I look at my setup then, I have to think about fractions, and I have to go through my math questions that I have for fractions. Can I add or subtract fractions? That answer is yes. But then I have to remember, what do I have to have? I have to have common denominators. And in this one, do I have it? Well, the denominators, once again, are the bottom numbers. That's an 8 and a 6. No, I don't have it. So what am I going to do? I got to make it. Now there's two different ways I can do this, and I'm going to do the one with the least number of steps, but I'll mention real quick how you could start it out. But then it would just have to lead to you reducing in the end. If I want to do a quick common denominator, then all I do is I multiply the denominator by the opposite one. And what that means is on the 8, I would multiply it by the opposite denominator, which is 6. And on the 6, I would multiply it by the opposite denominator of the 8. And that would give me a common denominator of 48. Then I would come up with my numerators, I'd get my answer, but then I'm going to have to reduce my answer. So what we taught way back, I believe it was chapter 2, was coming up with my least common multiple. So remember, least means smallest, common, they both have it. Multiple means I'm doing multiplication facts or multiplication problems to find it. So when I set them up. This is the way we set them up in our book. I told you to go out, times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4 at least, and sometimes you want to go out times 5 until you find one. Well, when I do my multiplication facts of 6 and I do my multiplication facts of 8, my third one on 8 is 24, which is the fourth one on 6. So I know that is my least common multiple. And if I use my least common multiple as my denominator, that keeps me usually from having to reduce when I get to my final answer. All right, so when I do that then, I know that I multiplied 8 by 3 to get 24, and I multiplied 6 by 4 to get 24. It's important to identify what I did to get to the 24 because I'm using the 24 as my common denominator. However, then I have to remember I have to change my numerators. So once again, whatever I multiply my denominator by, I have to turn around and do the same thing to my numerator. On the 3/8, if I multiplied the 8 by 3, I have to multiply the 3 by 3. And on the 6, if I multiplied it by 4, I have to multiply the 1 by 4. That gives me my new numerators. So I have 3 times 3 from 3/8. That gives me a numerator of 9. And I have 1 times 4 from 1/6, and that gives me a numerator of 4. Now, I have to go back through my questions. Can I subtract them? Yes. Do I have a common denominator? Yes. What do I do with it? I keep it. So don't make the mistake and get in a hurry and accidentally subtract them or add them. Make sure that in addition and subtraction, you say those questions and you tell yourself that once you have it, you're going to keep it. It's the numerators that you do the math with. So I have 9 minus 4, basic subtraction, first and second grade, you're good to go. 9 minus 4 is 5. I check to see if that can be reduced. It cannot. So once again, if I had done it with a denominator 48, I would have had a larger numerator and denominator, and I would have had to reduce to get to the 5/24. But I'm not done, right? Because we're doing integers. So I have to remember that I had a positive and a negative, and I have to know which one's bigger. So once I have my common denominator, then I know which one is bigger. But then I have to go back to my original problem to see what that sign was, because I may not remember. And the 9/24, was originally the 3/8, and that was the positive one. So that tells me that my answer has to be in the form of a positive 5/24. That one took a lot of steps, and like I said, if you had a lot or extra paper, then you could put all those extra steps down and take some notes so you would remember how to do those. All right, so those are all the same steps in addition of integers that you're going to be doing on your assignment. So you have 16 problems, and some of them are whole numbers, some of them are decimals, some of them are fractions. I even threw in some mixed numbers in there, that's a whole number and a fraction, in hopes that you'll put forth the effort to go back and review them if you don't remember how to do them. I then added 4 spiral review like we do on our normal assignments, just some things that some of us have not remembered real well. So use your book 1, just like this screen says, to go back and look. And I'll give you a hint. I told you the lesson underneath the problem number where you can look in book 1. If you are new and I didn't give you a book 1, please let me know and I'll get you one because I do have some extra copies. It's a good book. I don't expect you to go back and do all those lessons, but it is a good book to have as a reference, and I will be happy to get that for you. All right, so this assignment is your homework tonight. You'll have plenty of time in class to do it, and then ask questions if you're kind of confused.